Today, on Energy Contact, what goes up must come down, so the saying goes. And it's true most of the time, but more often than not, what comes down is a lot different than what went up. Today, we're going to see what that has to do with moonshine, with gasoline, and with your growth, health, and self-improvement. So prepare yourself for an intoxicating half hour, because that's what we're serving up right now on Energy Contact. Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series that I'm presenting to you as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and a new way of seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact between yourself internally and your environment. We're talking about the non-difference, the sameness between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy either. They're all the same. There's something about us that loves to categorize and classify, parse these things out, separate them, look at one little chunk under a microscope, and try to get the big picture from there. But in fact, all that health, growth, and self-improvement we're talking about take place when we do just the opposite, when we cease separating and we put these things together, when we make that energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that's thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. Let's move right ahead with that. Let's bring up our slide. Everyone please understand that I am not a doctor. I don't want to be a doctor. This show is not a medical advice show, it's not a medical discussion show, medical talk show, medical anything show. I might call myself an energy healer or a chakra healer, but state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not. They call me no such thing. It's important to know that. There's a lot of important stuff on your screen right now. Please read what's on there with your full attention, if you will. But when you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. Now here's why you want to do that. At the end of the show, we're going to run some credits, and when those credits roll, there's going to be contact information for me. Now, I invite and encourage you to contact me. In fact, I sort of hope that something I have to say to you today will inspire you to want to contact me. But in order to do that, you're going to need that contact information. And in order to get that, you're going to need a pencil and paper. There will be plenty of time to jot that information down if you have your pencil and paper ready. So please locate that now. All right. Today's show is show number 56. And if you're joining me for the first time today, well, thank you. Thank you so much and welcome. These shows are sequential. They build. So we're talking about things today that we've introduced, that we've explained, defined in previous shows. There's some ramp-up things, up-to-speed things you will have missed out on. However, I'm doing my very best to make each program have a lot of value on a standalone basis. And I think today's show does. I think you'll get a lot out of it. If it is one of your first times, though, and if what you see piques your interest, then I'll invite and encourage you to look for other shows. There will be earlier shows, previous episodes airing at later times, either later times right here on this channel or on different days and different times in different areas. And if you look for them, I'll appreciate it. All right, and now it's time for me to get my co-host on camera. Let's introduce Slim. This is my buddy Slim here, and Slim is here for a reason. Since we're investigating what it is that energy contacts in the physical self, we have to know a lot of things, don't we? We have some ground to cover here. We have to understand something about energy. And this show is certainly a show about energy. But all that energy out there somewhere does us no good at all. There's energy all over the place, but it does us no good until we bring it into contact with something. Well, Slim is here to help us understand that thing that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. And energy without a body, well, it might be a lot of wonderful things, but none of them are a human. Okay, so let's move along. Previously on energy contact, we have been discussing flows, pipelines and channels in our bodies, and what it is that flows through them. When we were kids in schools, we were taught that our bodies were these individual hunks of mass, that we were separate from one another, to be sure, but even worse than that we were separate from ourselves, that we were a body separate from a mind, separate from the spirit, separate from emotion, all discrete chunks. What a pity we were told that, huh? But on energy contact, we've experienced ourselves in a different and in a far more accurate way. You've seen yourself the way that Einstein saw you, as frequencies and waves and vibrations and pulses, as energetic forces and energy flows. Anything that flows has a current, like electricity does, like water does. Now those currents, they can shock us, they can overwhelm us, carry us away, they can even kill us. But they can also be controlled, mastered, wielded, honed into something that will improve our life, that will benefit us. While all these forces are invisible, they manifest themselves in very visible ways. They turn in to the real us, to the physical us. In fact, we've seen that it is very difficult, if not absolutely impossible, to be a spiritual person until and unless we learn how to promote the flow of invisible energy through our physical self, through our physical mass, our physical structure. So we want to know these flows. But since we can't see these flows and these forces, we have to use models to represent them, to represent the things that we can't present photorealistically. People have been doing that forever, from artists to scientists. And we've seen that while some models are useful, that all models are wrong, at least in that photorealistic sense. But sometimes a model's really all we got to work with. More often than not, some of the greatest scientific discoveries in the history of mankind were made using models, quite inaccurate models. So it's really not all that bad a deal. We've seen also, with respect to these models, that some models are scale models of other models. We've seen previously an atom and the solar system side by side, and they're really the same thing. They look exactly the same, except that one is infinitesimally small and the other one is huge. But they're archetypes, models of each other's. We've seen on energy contact how today's science is yesterday's mysticism, and how today's mysticism and crazy stuff will just be grade school science in a couple of generations. We've seen how the old mystics discovered things long ago, millennia ago, that quote-unquote modern science is just starting to catch up with. What else have we seen? Well, we've seen that invisible body intellect. We've seen how those same things, we've always thought they were brain things, inside the head things, recall, thought, reason, intellect, intelligence, all those things, that they are in fact in every cell of our body, that they permeate every cell of our body. That's the body intellect. We build everything into the body intellect, and the body intellect then distills it and recondenses it into this physical us. We've spoken a little bit about one more invisible force, a mysterious energy that those old Indian mystics called Kundalini energy. We've seen how all this has to do with how we look, how we act, how we think, and how we feel. And we're going to see more about it today. Because today we're continuing to look at those invisible yet very real channels, our pipelines in us through which energy flows. And we're beginning to look at what flows through these pipes as well, and about the stops and the nodes and the checkpoints that either facilitate these flows of energy or crimp them up or stop them up. Now, Newton told us about gravity, that what goes up must come down. But he also told us about entropy, about things that fall apart, and about energy that tends to fall upwards. Things behave differently, yet we're seeing that everything is all the same. With all these motions going on, sometimes things happen in ways that make us difficult for us to see them, to understand the connection between them. So that's what our show is about today then. It's about that connection, about understanding it, and the way these energies do flow upwards in us, and how these energies change on their journey, and how these energies change us on their journey. So, we're venturing into the land of chakras and auras and kundalini energy, mystical things like that. And we're going to throw in some new information today about the way we metabolize and distill that energy. But remember, while we want to understand all of this stuff, and we're moving into an understanding of all this stuff, what flows through the pipes doesn't do us much good. Understanding it doesn't do us much good if we don't understand the pipes themselves. All right, so much to get through today. But now we've got a moment where we can take a second to pause. Take a deep breath if you're in a place you can do that. Close your eyes if you can, because we have reached the point of our show where we get to take our virtual field trip, our journey in our mind's eye. Today, I want you to visualize that you've gotten a job assisting a master of pyrotechnics. Do you know what pyrotechnics is? It's fireworks. So you've gotten a job assisting a fireworks expert. All right, and so there you are, and he begins setting things off. And you watch as these fireworks shoot up and they explode in this blaze of glory and trail back downwards. And you realize something. So you say to this expert, you know, those fireworks, after they go off, they return to the earth, don't they? Let's be environmentally responsible. Let's go out to that field, find them on the ground. Let's refurbish them, recycle them, and set them off again. And the fireworks dude says, well, no, that's not really possible. You see, when the fireworks explode, they change so much that what comes back down is no longer the same as what went up. It's no longer usable. It's a funny thing about combustion. It changes things to the point where they cannot be restored. It's irreversible. And you think about that as he says that, and you think, well, if mass and energy are the same thing, and if they're neither created nor destroyed, then just what is it that those fireworks changed from? And what is it that they changed to? And why do same things behave so differently? Hold that thought. We've been speaking a lot about physics on energy contact. Well, today we're going to venture into a little bit of chemistry. Remember our focus. We're looking at pipelines, channels in our bodies. We're seeing today that energy rises up like steam in these channels. Energy falls up and it refines itself on the way up. Let's bring up a slide. We're going to look at a picture here of something that moonshine, gasoline, and some bottled water has in common. This is a diagram and a picture side by side of the same thing. It's a distillation apparatus, or to use the common term, it's a still. If you were to ever happen by a moonshine still out in the country somewhere, or if you ever pass by one of those huge oil refineries, what you're going to see is basically an elaborated version of this little apparatus that you see right here on your screen. That's really the business part of it. Pay close attention to the vertical column on each of those. We're going to come back to those. Here's how distillation works. We start with raw material, crude ore, dirty stuff. That's the liquid in the little pot. If you see on the very left of your screen there, the little pot that's over the little flame. So it's dirty stuff, but it's got good stuff in it too. And when we heat it, that entire mixture starts to steam up. That steam rises up that column. Now remember, there's no difference between the liquid and the steam. It's the same thing in different form, just like mass and energy. But as the steam rises up that column, the good stuff starts to separate from the lousy stuff, and it refines. Come back here. So you see now, you start to understand now how to make corn squeezins. You could set up shop, or you could learn how to make gasoline out of crude oil just by looking at that apparatus. Thousands of things that we use every day are either manufactured or processed using variations of those very simple distillation techniques. It's called fractional distillation, but it's still pretty simple. Now, if you believe ancient wisdom, this is exactly what Kundalini energy wants to do in the Sushumna Nadi in you right now. Okay, we're still interested in distilling because we're interested in the way that unseen energy channels we've been discussing distill energy. That distilling process is also known as refining. So we're not just steaming ourselves up. We're evolving. We're making our energy purer. We're putting it into a pure and usable form. Physiologically, we're very familiar with this, although you might not think so at first. You might think I'm getting a little abstract, but we're going to put it in very simple terms here. We take raw energy into us every day. We need to, in fact, but it's useless in the form in which it enters us. We have to transmute it into something we can use. You're thinking, what are you talking about? Well, we have to take raw air and convert it into oxygen. Then we have to take that gaseous oxygen from our lungs and convert it into something that our blood can carry. That's a distillation process. But wait, how did that blood get there? You think it just appeared there by magic? Of course not. It got there because we took raw food, broccoli and potatoes and such, and we converted it into our anatomy. That's all this stuff is last week's supper. We convert all that stuff into blood and bones and nerves and all of that. Mass into energy, energy into mass, mass into other kinds of mass. Let's bring up another slide. The conversion process is a little like distilling. And we're seeing that there's some things that are a lot like distilling. These things on your screen here are called fractionating columns. These are just different models of a fractionating column. That was the column on top of that little boiling pot that we saw. Look at those little sections, those little building blocks inside them. They're all a little different, but they all have them. Those things look like something you've seen before, and some things that ancient wise people knew about long before anybody knew anything about distilling. Can you guess? Well, let's move to our next slide, and you'll see. On this slide, you can see how that fractionating column looks very similar to a spine. That spine has little sections too, and something else. Those sections, those stacked blocks. In our spine, we call those individual pieces vertebrae. Now in energy contact, we've seen that our spine is a bunch of just stacked blocks in a row. And that makes it our main vertical structure. But it's not just our main vertical structure, it's also the home of our spinal cord. And that's the business end of the central nervous system, which makes our spine an energy pipeline, doesn't it? And that's barely a fraction of what's going on. That third image on your screen right now, that's how the ancient yogis saw that energy processing system along your spine. That's a picture of the Sushumna Nadi, along with two other nadis going up the side, and along with 7 chakras, those circles in the middle. If this is your first time watching, all those terms might be new to you, but we're going to review them all, at least a little bit, in just a second. All right, let's come back up here. Let's return to our unseen things that we're talking about. What things you're thinking? What about love, peace, goodness, anger, fear, frustration, jealousy, kindness, virtue? All those things, are they in there? Well, of course they are. They're in every one of us. Now, a surgeon can cut you open and he can look around all day long and he won't find any of those things. After the surgery, he can cut his little cell phone open and he won't find the little man who's talking to him either. He can go home, cut his stereo open, and he won't find the violin player. All these things are very real. You can't see them, but they're real. And they have something to do with emotion and spirit and energy, with the way you look, the way you act, the way you think, and the way you feel. And they can be refined. They need to be refined if we're going to get anywhere in this life. So if you want to have some control over that process, be a conscious and empowered participant in your own evolution, in your own purification, you need to know a little bit of something about how to process these invisible flows through your physical mass. Otherwise, you'll think it's all just random, that it's all just luck and this guy's lucky and that guy's unlucky. We're seeing that that's really not the case at all. All right. So there are these energy pipelines all through us that take something from one part of us and deliver it to another part of us. In a physiological sense, that's really all our bodies do. That's all they are. That's all the machine is designed to do. That invisible something that moves through us can be bad, like pains and diseases that shoot through us, or it can be very good, like Kundalini energy. Remember that what goes up more often than not comes back down. But the things that come back down the pipe are a lot different than the things that went up. And what vaporizes condenses. That's as sure a law as what goes up comes down. Some things, like our fireworks, change irreversibly. Even though we know that mass is the same as energy and that neither one can be created or destroyed, yet we observe a change inside that unity. We saw the Sushumna Nadi a minute ago. That was that thing on your screen. Let's take a second to review nadis and what that's all about. The easiest way to explain nadis is to explain meridians. And to do that, let's come and visit my friend Cool Chi Guy. Cool Chi Guy is making one of his screen appearances today. Cool Chi Guy here is an acupuncture model. Those little points on him are acupuncture points that you can see all through him. Matter of fact, the little blurbs there that you see, those are labels. This guy's a roadmap, an acupuncture model for acupuncturists. But those dots, those are all the acupuncture points. In Chinese, the word for them is tsubo, which translates literally into earthen pots or earthen vessels. So you Bible students take note of that. Now, if we wanted to, we could call all those little dots, we could call them chakras. But hold on, we're still getting just a little ahead of ourselves. What we're interested in right now is the little lines that connect those dots. You saw those on the screen. Those lines are called meridians. Well, what's a meridian? It's an energy channel. And the Chinese call that vital energy that flows through it qi. You've heard that word before. Well, Indians call that energy prana. And that's what flows through your nadis. So a nadi is just an energy channel. It's a pipe. It's a pipeline. You can think of a nadi as being like a blood vessel in your body, or like Cool Chi Guy's 14 meridians, except that according to old yogis, we have upwards of 72,000 nadis in us. We got big ones, little ones, long ones, short ones, tiny ones. We got horizontal ones and vertical ones, diagonal ones too. Nadis inside nadis. Nadis wrapped around nadis. They're all over the place. Now our surgeon, our friendly surgeon we talked about, he could cut us open and look all day long for a nadi, and he's not going to find one of those either, or a chakra either, by the way. But they are very real. The Sushumna Nadi is the biggest, and another two, called the Ida and the Pingala Nadi, wrap around it like snakes, as we'll elaborate upon shortly. Our ancient wise guys, the rishis, talked about nadis. It behooves us to remember that yesterday's mysticism is today's science, and what we're thinking is mystical, spooky stuff today will be tomorrow's science. Those ancient rishis knew things, and the more science we discover, the more we verify that. Let's go to another slide. So here what you see is a combination of a lot of vertical things that we've been discussing. All of those things on your screen right now are very similar. Energy flows up through all of them. We've looked at each of these things in some detail over the last number of episodes on energy contact. We'll run through them quickly, sort of left to right. Next to that spine there, that twisty thing, is DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. And you can see that it has vertebrae-like sections too. And we've seen that when energy falls up through it, that's what builds your ancestors' energy into your mass. But that's what makes you look like somebody who died 200 years before your grandparents were born. Next to that is that caduceus, that medical symbol, which was built in the image and likeness of the Sushumna Nadi next to it. Now that Sushumna and that fractionating column there, the two things on the right of your screen, they are both designed to purify and refine energy that move up through them. All right, let's come back up here. Those old rishis that we speak of, they didn't know about distilling, at least as far as we can tell they didn't, but their story of Kundalini energy rising sounds like a description, like a textbook description of distillation. They didn't know about DNA either, but we saw that this is a pretty direct analogy too. These things are archetypes of each other's, models, just like that tiny atom in the huge solar system are models of each other. So those old mystics knew a lot of things before the advent of what we'll call science, and they were absolutely right. Here's a question for you. How did they know? Okay. Let's go back to our focus. We're looking at energy pipelines and what flows through them. Blood flows through your veins and arteries, and blood carries energy. Electrical impulses flow through your nerves and your nervous system, and electricity is energy. Qi flows through your meridians like they flow through Cool Chi Guy's meridians, and qi is energy, and prana flows through your nadis, and prana is energy. All these things are all the same. They're just different words from different cultures, each of who were building their own models to try to depict the exact same thing. Remember, those ancients were interested in the energy that comes up from the earth. And you know what? So are we. In India, this very earthy energy was known as Kundalini, or Kundalini Shakti. Let's come back to that Sushumna Nadi. Let's bring up a slide again. Here's that Sushumna Nadi next to that medical symbol thingy again, the caduceus. We've seen that these are models of the exact same thing. The Sushumna Nadi is the vertical pole there in either one of them. Now that Sushumna picture is probably near identical to the ones that those old Indian mystics grew 8,000, maybe 10,000 years ago. You can't really draw a picture, remember, because they're not physical things. They're models. On that caduceus, remember we mentioned the other two nadis, the Ida and the Pingala. On that caduceus there, you can see them represented by those snakes. You can see them on the other side too. You see those little red and blue hoses that are going around those circles? That is the Ida and Pingala Nadi. And in either picture, that earthy energy shimmies up like those snakes, upwards in us, just like those snakes do, just like that Ida and Pingala do, at least if you believe those old yogis. Both of those pictures show 7 crossing points. And the circles at the 7 crossing points are called chakras. Let's go right to the next slide. That Sushumna Nadi is the focal point for people who want to understand chakras and Kundalini energy. And not only is it like the medical symbol, it's also like DNA, it's like a fractionating column, and like a spine. Just like you have to understand the spine if you want to know how nerves work. You have to understand DNA if you want to understand how genetics works. You have to understand fractionating columns if you want to understand how distillation works. You must understand the Sushumna Nadi if you want to understand how the body, mind, emotion, intellect, ego works. All right, let's come back up here. So finally, we've gotten to a place where we can begin to understand chakras and Kundalini energy. Now, if you ever get into a chemistry lab and observe that distillation process, you'll notice that that steam shimmies its way up the spine, or up the fractionating column, may as well be a spine, and it sort of reaches a point and it starts to drip back down from there. And then as it goes back into the boiling pot, it shimmies back up, and it does this over and over again. It rarefies and spins around, purifying and refining every step of the way. That's what we're doing with this Kundalini energy. And that's what we're going to talk about more next time. But for today, we're about out of time. Thank you so much for joining me. I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in energy contact.
Keep my mind